You can buy a bowl from a mass grave for $22 on eBay. The bowl comes with a certificate of authenticity explaining that it spent 177 years underwater, that it came from a shipwreck in 1822. That is a genuine piece of history. What the certificate doesn't mention, though, is that it was sitting next to human remains, that it was pulled from a ship where 1,600 people drowned in the darkness. It's cargo from one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history, but you can own it for $22. The ship was called the Tek Sing. On February 6, 1822, it hit a reef in the South China Sea and it sank within an hour. 1,600 people died, mostly poor Chinese families fleeing poverty, packed into the hold by cargo. The death toll was nearly identical to the Titanic, 1,600 versus 1,500. But here's the difference. When salvagers found the Titanic wreck in 1985, they protected it, made it illegal to take artifacts, treated it like what it was, a grave containing 1,500 bodies. When salvagers found the Tek Sing in 1999, they stripped it, brought up 350,000 pieces of porcelain and sold them at auction for over $10 million. Nobody stopped them. Today you can buy Tek Sing porcelain on eBay, Etsy, and antique shops around the world. Pieces of a mass grave are sold as collectibles. Now try buying Titanic silverware. You can't, it's illegal, because it would be obscene. But somehow, the Tek Sing is different. This is the story of two shipwrecks with the same death toll. One we remember with museums, memorials, and Hollywood movies. The other we forgot, and we sold it for profit. It's about who gets remembered and who gets forgotten, and it's about a question we don't like to ask. Whose lives matter enough to protect? April 10th, 1912, Southampton, England. The RMS Titanic departs on its maiden voyage. The largest, most luxurious passenger liner ever built. 882 feet long, 46,000 tons. There's a grand staircase, a swimming pool, a Parisian cafe. First-class passengers board with steamer trunks full of evening wear. The wealthy and famous are aboard. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in America. Benjamin Guggenheim, a mining magnate. Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's. This is the ship that cannot sink, the pinnacle of human engineering, the triumph of the industrial age. January 14th, 1822, 90 years earlier, the port of Amoy in southeastern China. The Tek Sing is preparing to depart for Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. This is not the Titanic. It's a large ocean-going junk, 167 feet long, 32 feet wide, weighing about 1,000 tons. It has 3 masts, the largest being nearly 96 feet high. It's primarily a cargo vessel, but it's also carrying people, about 1,800 passengers. Not wealthy industrialists, not famous artists, not anyone whose name will appear in a newspaper. Just poor Chinese farmers, laborers, and families fleeing poverty and chaos in the Qing dynasty. They've sold everything they own to pay for the passage to Southeast Asia, to Batavia, where there's work in the sugarcane fields. Think about that number, 1,800 people on a ship designed for cargo. The Titanic had luxury cabins, separate accommodations for first, second, and third class. The Tek Sing's passengers were packed into the hold, families crowded into every space below deck, with no cabins and no beds. Many sleeping on bare wooden planks or on the open deck, exposed to the elements. It had poor ventilation, limited food, and disease spreading in the cramped quarters. But they endure it, because at the end of this voyage, there's a chance of something better. The Titanic's passengers were seeking luxury and adventure. The Tek Sing's passengers were seeking survival. Both ships are carrying cargo. The Titanic carries mail, luxury goods, and a Renault automobile belonging to William Carter. The Tek Sing is carrying a massive amount of Chinese porcelain, plates, bowls, tea sets, and vases, an estimated 350,000 pieces. Blue and white ceramics from the Dihao kilns in the Fujian province, all heading to Southeast Asian markets. The cargo is carefully packed in a hold, serving as ballast. The Titanic is a floating palace. The Tek Sing is a floating marketplace of hope and commerce. The route from Southampton to New York is well traveled. The Titanic has an experienced crew, a captain with decades of experience and modern navigation equipment. But it also has something dangerous: hubris, the belief that this ship cannot sink. The route from Amoy to Batavia is also well traveled, but more dangerous. Ships have to navigate through the South China Sea, threading between islands, avoiding pirates, and, most critically, watching for reefs. The Gasper Strait is particularly treacherous. It has shallow waters, shifting sands, and coral reefs lurking just beneath the surface. Ships need experienced pilots to navigate it safely. The captain makes a decision. After nearly a month at sea with hungry passengers, little fresh water, and disease spreading below deck, he chooses a shortcut through the Gasper Strait. It's not the usual route. The area hasn't been thoroughly charted, but it could save them days. It's a gamble. The same kind of gamble the Titanic's captain will make 90 years later, sailing at full speed through ice-filled waters. Because the ship is unsinkable. Because the schedule matters. Because what could possibly go wrong? April 14th, 1912, 11:40 p.m. The Titanic strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The impact is almost gentle. Some passengers don't even notice. A slight shudder, the sound of ice scraping against steel. But below the waterline, the iceberg has opened up the hull. 5 compartments are flooding. The ship can survive 4. It will take 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. Time enough for some lifeboats to launch. Time enough for the band to play on. Time enough for the famous and the wealthy to send telegrams and say goodbye. They had some lifeboats, but not enough. But some. 16 wooden lifeboats and 4 collapsible boats. Capacity for 1,178 people on a ship carrying 2,224. It wasn't enough, but it was something. There's time for heroism. There's time for the Strauss couple to choose to die together. Time for the band to play Nearer My God O Thee. Time for Captain Smith to go down with his ship. Stories that will be told for generations. February 6, 1822, night, Gasper Strait, South China Sea. The Tek Sing strikes the Belvedere Shoals at full speed. The impact is not gentle. The wooden hull, already stressed from carrying twice its safe capacity, splits open like kindling. On deck, passengers are thrown into the sea. The ship lurches to one side. Below deck, it's catastrophic. This isn't the Titanic's grand staircase. This isn't separate compartments that can be sealed off. This is 1,800 people packed into cargo hold. I want you to imagine that space. Shoulder to shoulder in the darkness. No cabins, no beds. Most sleeping on bare wooden planks. The air is thick and humid. The stench of unwashed bodies, vomit, and human waste. In pitch black darkness, the crash throws them against the walls. Then the screaming starts. In that space, there may be 3 or 4 narrow ladders leading up to the deck. If you can find them. No lifeboats. No women and children first. No organized evacuation. Just ladders and panic. Do the math. People surge toward the ladders, trampling each other, clawing over bodies, parents trying to lift their children up, families being torn apart in the crush. The water is rising fast, knee-deep, waist-deep, chest-deep. In the pitch black, You can't see where you're going. You can only hear the screaming, feel the press of bodies, taste the salt air filling your lungs. The Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. The Tek Sing went down within an hour. 1 hour from impact to completely underwater. There's no time for heroism, just raw, desperate, and brutal survival. The people who make it to the surface face their own nightmare. The dark only offers open sea and strong currents. On the Titanic, survivors climb into the lifeboats. They're cold, they're traumatized, but they're out of the water. Tek Sing survivors cling to debris, sections of the mast, and pieces of the deck. Some manage to reach the shallow waters over the reef, standing on coral with their heads barely above water. Some try to swim towards nearby islands in the dark. Most simply drown from exhaustion, from exposure, from watching hundreds of people die around them in the darkness. The survivors, about 190 of them, spent 2 days adrift. Not 2 hours in lifeboats, 2 days. April 15th, 1912, early morning. The RMS Carpathia arrives at the Titanic's last known position and picks up 705 survivors from the lifeboats. The world is already learning what happened. The Titanic's radio operator sent distress signals. SOS, we are sinking. Newspapers will have the story within hours. At the Tek Sing, 2 days after the sinking, the British ship Indiana, captained by James Pearl, is passing through the Gasper Strait. Pearl is an ex-Navy officer. He's experienced, alert. He spots something in the water, debris, wreckage, people. Despite the hazardous proximity to the same reefs that destroyed the Tek Sing, Pearl orders his crew to rescue whoever they can. They pull the 190 survivors from the water. The small Chinese junk rescues another 18. Total survivors about 208 people, out of 1,800 aboard. That's an 11% survival rate. The Titanic's survival rate was 32%. But here's the real difference. When the Carpathia docked in New York with Titanic survivors, the world was watching. Reporters were waiting. Photographers captured their arrival. The survivors' names were recorded, their stories were told, their testimonies filled newspapers for weeks. When Captain Pearl landed the Tek Sing survivors in Batavia, some clerk probably noted 200 Chinese rescued from a shipwreck. But no names recorded, no testimonies taken, no photographs. Most of the survivors couldn't read or write. They were too poor to matter. 1,517 people perished on the Titanic. Their bodies were recovered, identified, and returned to their families where possible. Memorials were built, graves were marked. We know their names. On the Tek Sing, 1,600 people didn't make it. Their bodies were never recovered. No memorials were built, no graves were marked. Most of them were so poor their names were never even recorded. They vanished beneath the South China Sea, forgotten. The Titanic disaster becomes one of the most famous tragedies in history. The Tek Sing disaster becomes a footnote, if that. For 177 years, the wreck sits undisturbed on the ocean floor, about 30 meters down. The porcelain cargo, protected by silt and sand, remains preserved. A time capsule of 1822, slowly being claimed by the sea. The Titanic wreck is discovered in 1985. It's immediately protected, as it should. It's declared a memorial site. Taking artifacts is illegal. The Tek Sing, well, it's a different story. September 1st, 1985, Robert Ballard discovers the wreck of the Titanic 2.5 miles down. He uses advanced deep-sea technology. The discovery makes international news. Within hours, governments are discussing how to protect the site. It's a grave, a memorial, a piece of history. Taking artifacts from the Titanic wreck becomes illegal under the international maritime law. The site is sacred. May 12, 1999, British marine salvage expert Michael Hatcher discovers the wreck of the Tek Sing. It's about 30 meters down. Hatcher is already controversial. In the 80s, he salvaged another shipwreck, the Geldermalsen, a Dutch VOC vessel. He auctioned off its Chinese porcelain for millions. Maritime archaeologists were furious, said he destroyed irreplaceable historical context, that he treated archaeological sites like treasure hunts. But Hatcher found buyers, collectors who wanted Chinese porcelain, who didn't care about context. And now, he's found something even bigger. The Tek Sing cargo is extraordinary. Hatcher's team brings up about 350,000 pieces of Chinese porcelain, all in very good condition despite being underwater for 2 centuries. His crews find human remains, but they don't disturb them. Most of Hatcher's crew is Indonesian and Chinese. They believe disturbing the dead brings bad luck, so the bones stay where they are. But the porcelain, they take it, all of it. When Ballard found the Titanic, he photographed it, documented it, left it where it lay. He treated it like what it was, a grave containing 1,500 bodies. When Hatcher found the Tek Sing, he stripped it. He brought up every piece of porcelain he could find and destroyed the archaeological context. He turned a mass grave into a salvage operation, and nobody stopped him. November 2000, Stuttgart, Germany. Nagel Auctions holds a massive sale, the entire Tek Sing cargo. Collectors from around the world bid on pieces. Now imagine if this happened with the Titanic. Imagine if someone brought up silverware from the dining room, dishes from first class, personal effects from the cabins, and auctioned them off in Germany. There would be an international outrage, legal action, criminal charges even. But with the Tek Sing, auction goes forward. The total sale brings over $10 million. $10 million for cargo pulled from a mass grave containing 1,600 bodies. And that's when some people start objecting. Maritime archaeologists are furious. They argue that Hatcher has essentially looted a cemetery. The Tek Sing wasn't just a cargo ship. It was the final resting place of 1,600 people. Every piece of context about how the ship sank, how people died, what life was like aboard, all that destroyed in the rush to bring up the porcelain. UNESCO points out that this violates principles of underwater cultural heritage. The wreck should have been carefully excavated, documented, studied, just like the Titanic. But here's the thing. The Titanic is protected because it's in international waters, and because the victims were mostly Western, wealthy, and important. The Tek Sing is in Indonesian waters, and the victims were poor Chinese immigrants. Nobody cared. Hatcher and supporters of commercial salvage have a defense. They argue that without the profit motive, the wreck could never have been found. The porcelain would have eventually degraded and been looted by less professional divers. Better to salvage it properly and share it with collectors than let it disappear. Besides, it's just porcelain. It's not like they're selling the bones. Now there's some logic to what he says, but imagine that argument about the Titanic. Well, if we don't bring up this silverware, it'll just corrode down there. Better we sell it to collectors and let it go to waste. You can't imagine that argument because it's obscene. But for the Tek Sing, it's considered reasonable. So who profits? The auction brings in $10 million. Michael Hatcher's exact cut isn't public, but after paying his crew and expedition costs, it's safe to say he walks away with millions, all from stripping a mass grave. Nagel Auctions takes their commission, probably 20%. That's another $2 million. Then the pieces scatter. Dealers buy them in bulk at auction and mark them up, sell to collectors and antique shops worldwide. Those dealers profit. The antique shops profit. And today, individuals on eBay and Etsy profit. Selling bowls for $22, plates for $50, tea sets for a few hundred, each transaction extracting value from 1,600 dead bodies. The Indonesian government tries to stop the sale. They argue the cargo was illegally exported from their territory. But they're too slow. By the time they get the legal paperwork together, most of the porcelain is already sold. However, 7 containers of cargo are seized by the Australian authorities under the Protection of Movable Cultural Heritage Act. Australia holds 71,939 pieces. September 12, 2001, they returned items to Indonesia. In August 2022, exactly 200 years after the sinking, Australia returns another 333 pieces. But here's the thing. The porcelain goes to Indonesian government, not to descendants of the victims, mainly because we don't know who the victims are. Their names were never recorded. At a minimum, though, it should have been returned to the Fujian province era where most of the victims were from. Australian Minister for the Arts makes a statement. These items should never have left Indonesia, he says, and been offered for sale. By returning these items to Indonesia, we also honor those who lost their lives in this disaster. 200 years later, they still couldn't get it right. It sank in Indonesian waters. But that's it. Most of the victims were Chinese. There is no record of ownership of the cargo, but it likely belonged to the VOC or Chinese merchants. Not to Indonesia. Today, pieces of the Tek Sing cargo are scattered across the world. Museums, private collections, antique shops. You can buy a Tek Sing bowl on eBay for $22, on Etsy for $111, at auction for a few $100s. Go ahead, search Tek Sing porcelain. You'll find a bunch of listings. Each one comes with a certificate of authenticity, explaining that this bowl came from the 1822 shipwreck, that it spent 177 years underwater. What the certificate doesn't mention is that the bowl was pulled from a mass grave, that it was packed by someone who died in the wreck, that it sat near their remains. But hey, it's a cool item. Great conversation piece. It's only $50. Free shipping. Now type Titanic into Google. You get multiple museum exhibits, documentaries, feature films, books, memorials, and tourist attractions. We know the names of the victims. We know their stories. We know what they ordered for dinner. These stories are embedded in our cultural memory. The Tek Sing gets a Wikipedia page, auction listings for porcelain, a few academic articles, and links to buy bowls on eBay. No museums dedicated to the victims, no memorials, no Hollywood movies. We don't know the names of the people who died. We don't know their stories. We don't know what they dreamed about as they set sail for Java. Same death toll, same human tragedy, but one we remember and one we forgot. Why? I could say it's because the Titanic victims were wealthy Westerners, and the Tek Sing victims were poor Chinese immigrants. And that would be true. I could say it's because the Titanic had dramatic stories and the Tek Sing just had people drowning in the dark. And that would also be true. But I think it's simpler than that. History remembers the people who can afford to be remembered, the people whose lives were considered important enough to record, whose names were written down. The Tek Sing's passengers were too poor for their names to be recorded, too poor for their death to matter, too poor for anyone to build a memorial. There were immigrants seeking work in sugarcane fields, farmers fleeing poverty, nobodies. And when nobodies die, we don't build museums. We sell their dishes on eBay. Maybe that's the real story here. Not about treasure hunters or maritime law, but about who we choose to remember and who we allow ourselves to forget. The Titanic of the East, same death toll, but only one of them matters. Thanks for watching. I'm Henry, and this was But Now.